You're at the Coaching Inn, 3D Coaching's virtual pub, where we enjoy conversations with people who are engaged in the world of coaching.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Coaching Inn. I'm your host, Clare Pedrick, and today we're having a book corner. Took me ages to come up with that name. Before I introduce our guests at the book corner, just a reminder, if you'd like to subscribe or follow, you can get every episode as they drop. So, Julie Luscombe from Jersey. For those of you in other parts of the world, Jersey is a beautiful island that's part of, well, Julie and Claire can tell us the geography of Jersey, but it's in the sea, south of England and north of France. So Julie just sent me an email and said, how about me and my friend come and talk about some books we've read? And I went, what a brilliant idea. So Julie Luscombe and Clare Humbleby, welcome to the Coaching Inn.
Thank you, Claire.
Thank you so much.
It was such a good idea. Honestly, it was such a good idea. So tell us about yourselves. So Claire, why don't you start? Tell us a bit about you and your coaching journey.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. It's really exciting to be here. I started my coaching journey relatively recently, I guess, in kind of proper official terms. I've only had my business Wonder Career for about 2.5 years. But when I think back on it, depending on how you think about coaching in terms of kind of the directive level or not, I've been doing coaching within my kind of career, and I guess even going back further than that throughout the whole of my kind of working life. So my background is HR. I worked as an HR professional. I've worked across a number of different businesses, different jurisdictions, different locations. And I guess all of that working with senior leaders. And actually so much of my role was about coaching. And I suppose like many people, I guess there was a bit of a fear. And so the way that I thought I'd go into coaching was around career coaching. I guess you don't know what you don't know. So I thought that would be my niche area to have the expertise. And I moved into kind of doing career coaching training first of all. And then from there have kind of taken on more wider coaching, more exec coaching, a bit more HR coaching. And I'm based here in Jersey, and that's how I know Julie.
Fantastic. Well, welcome, Claire, and welcome, Julie.
Thank you. Yeah, so similar to Claire in terms of I've only been going in terms of a coaching business for a couple of years. My business is People Like Me Coaching. And also some similarities with Claire, but with a completely different career background. I'm a mental health nurse by background, and most of my 40-odd career has been in health and social care in one form or the other, whether that's in education. I was a senior lecturer for the nursing and master's programme, and also head of education at a local hospice, as well as working for local government. And the reason all that is relevant is all of that involved helping people to reach their potential, whatever that potential was, and left me with a real hunger, if you like, for just supporting people to be the best that they can be. And it was the pandemic that steered me in this direction, because I'd always done informal coaching within my roles. But I decided during the pandemic, as lots of us did, to relook at priorities and started to look at coaching courses, coaching training courses. And I used all my holiday money and holiday time, no one was going anywhere, to qualify as a coach, with actually the idea that it was going to be a retirement plan. But then I did it and I loved it. And I'm like, what am I waiting for? What am I waiting for? Why don't I have a go? I knew there was a need. I knew there was a gap. My market tends to be health and social care professionals for the obvious reason, although not exclusively so. And yes, I am absolutely loving it 2 years down the line.
Lovely. That sounds great. And what I love most about your last email, Julie, is you said we're two self-employed coaches who haven't written a book, don't host a podcast, and have nothing to promote. You are so welcome here.
Thank you. Well, I think that's slightly untrue, because I think Julie is probably writing a book, because she's a bit of a secret writer on the side, hence our obsession with books, different books. So she's slightly not told you the truth there, Claire.
Well, yeah, but it's not a coaching book. It's a crime fiction book, so that's not quite the same.
Oh, oh, now you've really got me. So I think coaches have two addictions. I think there are two addictions that that are required by people who become coaches. One is an addiction to stationery, because it seems that every
Oh,
coach
yes.
loves notebooks
Yeah.
and pens.
Yeah.
But the other one is an addiction to books.
Mm.
So before we start on the coaching books, given that it's the summer, best recommendation for a novel?
Oh my
Ooh.
goodness. I've just finished an excellent one. Demon Copperfield by Barbara Kingsolver.
Oh, she wrote the Poisonwood Bible.
She did, which I've not read, but I'm going to
Oh,
now. Yeah.
wow.
It was a
I'm
Thank
not
you.
non-put-downable one. Couldn't put it down.
Amazing. Claire, what's yours?
I can't help it. I still love it. It's a few years old now, but The Midnight Library, anybody that hasn't read it by Matt Haig, is one of my absolute faves. I love it. Even though I'm not really a sci-fi person, I love the idea of that. And actually, I've just read the versions of Us. For anyone that's loved One Day, didn't everybody? Julie and I definitely did. Anyone that loved One Day, the versions of Us is a kind of along the same lines, three different things that
Mm.
happen.
Don't say too much, because my colleague has lent me that for my holiday.
Oh, okay, I won't
Ah.
say more.
And it's got a very fancy cover, hasn't it? The hardback.
Yeah.
Has it? I don't know.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. In fact, if it was on my desk, I'd hold it up, but it's in the packing. So now we've covered off novels, which is a very important thing. Tell me about what you've loved around about books that are more around the workspace or the life space.
I think, I mean, it's probably fair to say I did a post. I love a LinkedIn post with a photo. And I did do one that wasn't me, that was about kind of book Jenga. So sometimes I think I'm going to be buried alive under the books that I'm currently reading. So unlike Julie, who I think gets to the end of them, I've always got more than one on the go at any one time. So I'll be talking to you about the books that I'm kind of halfway through. Always with them, because there's always another recommendation, isn't there?
Yeah.
So I think we've got some that we like. And actually, I don't know whether it's kind of helpful, Claire, just to explain how Julie and I met, because it kind of relate to books in that I think we both started about the same time. We're both probably, I don't know if this is fair to say about Julie, because I'm not actually asked her, but a bit sort of magpie-ish, as in we collect ideas and inspiration and different things. And I think at that point, and this is probably my imposter syndrome, I felt the need to go on lots of courses and do lots of things that would kind of give me credibility. And the first time I met Julie was at a digital learning course, a social media course. And then shortly afterwards, we both got connected. There's a Jersey Association of Coaching Practitioners being kind of set up by a colleague of ours, Sue Pallow. And we met through that. And then the final thing was through a business book club. And then by that point, we had so many connections overlapping that we were like, oh, we're destined to be friends and go for
Follow
champagne
each other around the island.
Yeah. And
For
so
champagne.
first
That's great.
book that I think we read together was Julie's an absolute super fan. Oliver Burkeman, 4,000 weeks. Time and how to use it. So she is an absolute fan, but that's how we got started with our books.
Oh, fantastic. So shall we start with 4,000 Weeks? I'm also a super fan of Oliver Burkeman.
Yeah.
So what is it? And listeners, I'll put the links to all these books in the, because if we get so excited that you don't catch the title, they'll be in the show notes. So what's the gem for you, Julie, in 4,000 Weeks?
It struck me within the first couple of chapters that this is the book I wish I'd written. Do you know, you read books like that and you're like, oh my God, I wish I'd written this. And also I wish I'd read it when he first wrote it, which was around the time of the pandemic, because it really spoke to my experience, because I was that productivity junkie when I was employed by other people. In high pressure roles, senior roles, I was all for using the tools, for managing my time, etc., etc. And the list was manageable, but never got any less, etc., etc. And it just got to the point that I'm like, what is the point of all this? what is really actually important to me. And so I'd been through the process that he talks about by the time I'd read the book, but he really talks about that slowing down, that giving yourself permission to slow down, to going back to your own personal why, all the stuff we do with our coaching clients, and what is really important to you, what matters to you, what are your values, and how are they showing up in your life at the moment? Maybe they are, maybe they're not. And one of the and it's the book that I probably recommend to my clients the most, because as I said, I mostly work with health and social care coaching clients. They're all in a state of overwhelm at the moment in terms of having come through some really hard years after the pandemic. Too much to do, too little time, not being able to switch off, all the red flags of burnout. And this book really speaks to that experience and that recommendation of just slowing down and giving yourself some headspace. But also the thing that I really like about what he said was the pay yourself first, which we know is the right thing to do. Make sure you are spending time on things that bring you joy first, and then everything else, it gives you a little bit more perspective. And I often found that with coaching clients, it seems almost counterintuitive when they're talking to you about how busy they are and how overwhelmed they are, to suggest or guide them in terms of their thinking about what could they add in. But you're talking about adding in something for them that brings them joy. And at first, that's just like, I can't even think of joy or adding something in for me. But the difference that makes, just that tiny little thing for them, it can be really transformational. So I love that book because it spoke to my experience, and it's something that I hear from clients all the time.
Yeah. And it builds on that Covey thing, because Stephen Covey said in one of his books, didn't he, begin with the end in mind?
Yeah.
And I think often we can assume that we've got infinite time, and we haven't. So recognizing that actually, I mean, at my stage of life, I've got less than 2,000. Well, I mean, none of us know how long we've got, do we? But really going actually in the however many thousand, I definitely haven't got 2,000 left. That would be really awful. But let's say I have 1,000 or 1,500, but you don't know. But, to then say, so in those weeks, what is it I want to do with my, with my one precious life?
Yeah. How are you going to make it? Oh, that quote is on my website, Claire. What are you going to do with your one wild precious life?
Oh, nice.
Because that's
also
so,
in the genre of, Have you read Falling Upwards by Richard Rohr?
No.
Oh, we're going to be higher.
Yeah.
Can I just tell you that there's a podcast the other day with Shruti Santhalia, which on the YouTube video, you can see she has got the highest pile of books behind her that I've ever seen. And I thought that was just her thing. But actually, I've spoken to someone today who is the same thing. And she's got a light on the top of her pile.
Oh,
my question is, does she have a pole through the middle, or may the whole pile fall over? So
dangerous, isn't it?
Anything to add, Claire, about 4,000 Weeks?
Yeah, I mean, I think Judy summed it up really well. I mean, I think the book's almost in two parts in a way, because it's got that kind of, I guess, the idea of what time is about and us thinking about that in a different way. And then the second part of it is quite practical in some of the tools that it also suggests and recommends as well. And I particularly like, see, as you said, I am a bit of a stationery queen, so I've got my notes there. But I particularly like the kind of the 10 tools that he gives at the end of it. And I thought there were some aspects of it, whilst I do the same as Julie, I also often kind of recommend that it might be something my clients might want to read and have gifted it and things before. And that's partly because my clients are slightly different to Judy's, but I typically work with midlife kind of career professionals who are looking to make that change. So again, that idea of time and that finite idea of time is coming much more into play. So for different reasons, there's a big interest. But I was also reflecting on it when I was thinking about it earlier, about how actually it also really links in with coaching and our role as coaches as well. Because I know, like, for example, Claire, within your book, you talk about time and how we need to kind of partition off that time and be clear about it and be transparent about it. So I think there's something in that too. But I also like the fact that he refers to kind of paying attention to every moment, better start from the assumption that, change is inevitable. And those are things that kind of resonate with my coaching, as well as the idea of the time behind it too.
Well, so 4,000 Weeks by Oliver Burkeman. And your build on that is Falling Upwards by Richard Rohr.
Yes, I've written that down.
Good to hear it. It's quoted. There's a few quotes from Richard Rohr in The Human Behind the Coach. It's a really interesting book, though, because the first time I read it, I didn't like it.
Oh, that's interesting.
And abandoned. I'm like you, Claire. I have 20 on the go all the same time. So I just abandoned it to not be on the go anymore. And then somebody recommended it again, and I read it again, and there's a bit beyond the bit where I gave up the first time that says, you won't understand this book unless you've fallen over.
Oh, so
And
what does it mean by that, Claire?
So he says there's the first life and the second life. And some people never get to the second life. They just keep trying to repeat the first life, the first part of the journey. And actually, the thing that often propels us into the second journey, the second half of life journey, is some kind of incident or episode or something which breaks us a bit and where we fall over. And at that point, we're much more able to engage in the second journey. There are other books. There's one of my colleagues recommends a book which I've got on my shelf, but I can't remember who wrote it, which is called Second Journey, and it has the same kind of philosophy in it that it's likely that something will happen that puts us into the second journey and brings a different quality of life.
Change, isn't it, Claire? I suppose.
Yeah.
And actually, it makes me think about quite a lot of my clients, because I work with private clients, but I also work with a consulting company doing a lot of outplacement work. So quite a number of my clients that come through there have been made redundant. And so it's amazing how many of them, what a percentage of them say, I didn't want this to happen, but I'm actually quite glad it has, because it's forced me out of my comfort zone. It's made me make a change that I wasn't brave enough to do. So I think I can definitely see, that element of there being an impetus for change.
Yeah.
There's also a Chinese proverb that is really similar to what you just said. And it's like, we only have two lives. We have two lives, but the second one only begins when we realise we've only got one.
That is deep. Say it again, please.
We have two lives, but the second one only begins when we realise we only have one.
That's amazing, isn't it?
So instead of maybe an incident happening, or an event, it's some form of realisation that, like Oliver Burkeman says, we've only got 4,000 weeks.
Yeah, but it might be an incident or an episode that happens for someone else that we witness.
Yeah.
Wow. We have to keep having this conversation, but I'm kind of going off thinking about all sorts of things which I will leave for later on. Otherwise, it's going to be silent for ages. So, what books most surprised you in this business coaching space?
It's not so much the first thing that came to my head then was not so much a book that surprised me, but surprised me that I would need it because I hadn't considered I would need it. And it was actually a very practical book by Sarah Short, Coaching Business in a Book. Because when we're training to be coaches, that we're qualifying to be coaches. We're not qualifying to be business people. And one of my biggest learning curves as a coach was, how do I run this thing called People Like Me Coaching? How on earth do I do this? Because I've been a nurse or an educator for all of my life, and someone else has done all that stuff for me, and I've just been employed by them. So I did a lot of it by trial and error, and luckily I'd done okay. But again, Sarah Short wrote the book I wish I'd read 2 years ago when I started, because it's excellent. It's excellent. And 2 years on, I'm refining stuff that I'm doing or saying messaging purely from Sarah Short stuff. So I would, any coach out there who is running their own business and hasn't come across Sarah Shaw, I would absolutely recommend that they go and have a look at that, or at least her website, because she's got lots of resources on there.
And there's a couple of episodes with Sarah that I'll put in the
Oh,
show
is there?
notes.
I've not listened to those.
She's been to the Coaching In.
Excellent.
Yeah. In fact, it's probably high time we had her back.
Sounds like it.
So, Claire, what books most surprised you?
I suppose there's not particularly one book that surprised me, but I think as I've gone on my coaching journey and kind of read more and more, I think, as I said, I started off with that idea, and I'm a bit scared to mention the word tools, but the career coaching that I did involve a lot of tools, and I've moved away from that more. But I think for me, I started off with a lot of books around those kind of tools and frameworks, and now it's more about, really, I think it's about how I see different coaching books and then pick up those same things. And it feels a bit like how it does with clients as well, where often the same themes and insights are coming up with them. And it's actually the power of those common themes and common insights that help them to collect the data and then, make their decisions about how they want to move forward. So I think there's something about seeing those different things in different books and picking up different things, like we talked about, the Oliver Burkeman book, but also other books where you then can read in and see the same things coming up, and it gives a lot more power to it. So I think that's probably where it's come for me. I've been surprised, I guess, by what I can learn from all different books, and actually not even just coaching books. I mean, sometimes you read a passage in a fictional book, or it will make you think. Julie's really great at taking time to think. She's a real advocate for doing what she says, which is one of the things I really like about her. So she's really good at taking more time and thinking and processing. So most of our conversations start with, have you read? Have you seen? Have you listened to? So 90% of the time, that's how we start a conversation. I'm going to share.
Yeah, it's funny though, isn't it? The thing about getting lots of things from different places, because that phrase that you've given us, Julie, from the Chinese proverb about you only realise that the second life starts when you realise you've only got one life. That's a bit of a life-changing sentence. And it's probably in a book somewhere, but you don't need to read that book, because that in itself is so much to sit with and to ponder and to wonder about.
Yeah.
I'm with you, Claire, about, they don't have to be coaching books, because Listen by Catherine Mannix and Improv Your Life by Pippa Evans, which are both two of the top 4 coaching books that we recommend, neither of them about coaching.
Yeah.
But you can make your own meaning. So, yeah.
I think one of the other things that comes up for me, Claire, is that also kind of an insight from coaching books is how varied they are. They really are so varied. And you think about this kind of, I guess, spectrum of coaching and the level of direction, non-direction, what it means. And one of the things that I've been really thinking about is that kind of language. I think, what the words that we use. I think I was listening to your podcast the other day, and I'm trying to think who it was. You were with a guest who was talking about kind of really simplifying coaching, but kind of taking, I guess, making it practical for everybody. And I think there's really something in the language that we use, that whole coachee, client, all of that is so difficult, but yet you can take from different books will all approach that in a completely different way. And like even I've been reading Creative Career Coaching, and I've also been reading A Beautiful Way to Coach, and they're very different books. Both of them use tools, but in a really different way. And I think even this word around tools and interventions, trying to get your head around what that actually means, because I've heard you enough to know that you're not a fan of the tools particularly, but I think it's probably fair to say, as a relatively new coach, I think particularly in the beginning I really relied on my tools and my framework, because I was terrified that if I didn't have that structure, I didn't know how I would kind of be. And I think it's taken me a number of years to get to a point where I can go into a conversation, and now it's what comes up in that conversation from the thinker that then inspires me to think about and agree with them a tool that might be helpful. And it's still work in progress. I'm definitely not there yet. But I definitely think that's something that's come across for me from those different books, is that
Interesting.
you really get very different perspectives. Some will be tool after tool after tool after tool, and others will have no tools at all. And as a new coach, you don't really know which ones to pick up that is going to be your style of coaching, your own kind of approach and way.
I think there's something for me about getting the foundations right before we use tools. Otherwise, we get lost in the tools and then we don't get any foundations. Then it's a bit chaotic. I've just designed a course called I can't remember what it's called. Something about using a menu. So I think what it's easy for coaches to do is to read lots of books and then create a kind of curriculum for the coaching. But that puts the power with the coach. But there's absolutely nothing wrong with giving a copy of the book to the person that you're coaching and saying, there's a whole load of stuff in here that might be useful for us. Some of it you're going to love and some of it you're going to hate. So why don't you read the book and then we'll work out what we need to do together. So now you stop being the secret sauce maker.
Yeah.
With the power.
And you start, but it brings the tools and the exercises into the room, but it brings them into the room in a shared way. So the when I deliver the course for the first time in a few weeks' time, I'm going to use the book by, it's the bottom of my pile, the book by Michael Watkins called The First 90 Days.
Yeah.
Because, it's not unusual for people to coach leaders in the first 90 days. But instead of going, oh, these are the things we need to go through, just to say, look, this book might be really useful. And it might be that you just look at the titles of the chapters. It might not be that you read the book at all. But have a look at this, and then that will help us work out some of the things that it might be useful for us to do. Because there's an equality, I think, for me in that. Because otherwise, why are they using us? They could read the book on their own.
Yeah. I agree. I think I had to stop reading books about coaching in my first year almost, because like Clare, at first I thought, oh, I want to do this properly. And I'd trained with Tracy Sinclair, The Art of Science and Coaching. So it was very much the pure coaching technique. But then I started to panic and thought, oh my God, why are people going to pay me just for me to listen to the last question? I need to bring some tools in. And I was just on the verge of thinking I need to do a package that involves tools. And I found your book, which was Simplifying Coaching. And that settled me down. I'm like, no.
Because I went,
I
agree with Tracy.
Yeah, you do, basically. So I was just like, no, that's fine. Just trust what I know, trust what I learned, trust the process. And then I do, as you've both said, I will bring in tools, particularly around overwhelm. There's some things that will grab, but I will give them the choice. So there's a set of things I can use, and I will show them or give them access to it and say, what is going to be most helpful, if any, of this for you? And and I'm happy with that balance now.
Fantastic. So we talked about the most surprising book. So my question is now, which is your absolute go-to?
The one that has made the most impact on me in my coaching life, I think, is probably, it's not a coaching book. It's Kate Northrup, Do Less, Achieve More. And she talks about the concept of curating your life. And so bringing all aspects of your life into your week, because I'd already, as soon as I'd left employed work for a reason, to get rid of that world of on the hamster wheel productivity. And what did I do in my first few months of coaching business? I recreated exactly the same. Realized I was doing it, and I read this book and I just thought, okay, right, stop. I need to bring all aspects of me into the week, not just the work me. And so the way that she writes about it is looking at everything that's important to you on a weekly basis and actually planning that all into your week so that it's all got equal priority. So the me time, the family time, the friend time is as important as my work time. I've got to earn money. I've got to pay the bills. I've got to get the money that I need to have. But that shouldn't be the be all and end all. Otherwise, I might as well have stayed employed where I was and be earning much more than I am now, to be quite honest. But it's life, isn't it? And it goes back to it's about making spending the time in the most meaningful way that we can. And her book absolutely changed the way I plan my weeks, my life, and has had the most transformational impact, I'd say.
Amazing.
I love that. I don't think there's one, but I have to say a book that is, I think, am I right in thinking you've had Leslie Roberts on here in terms of coaching
Yes.
in nature?
Yeah.
So I did a course with Leslie and then have subsequently read her book. And it was partly that also Julie's also done the course with Leslie. Ironically, it's a coaching in nature course that we did online because she's in Scotland and we're here in Jersey. But having read her book after doing the course, it really resonates with me personally. So that idea of bringing nature into the coaching, it's not always possible to do it, but I think it kind of resonates with me personally. And I think the walking, talking, I like the fact that, again, reading some other books, the Beautiful Way to Coach that I'm reading at the moment, she very much focuses, Fiona Parashar, very much focuses on the idea of being outside and having those nature days. I think the idea of walking, talking, I think both Julie and I really enjoy that. It's probably, I would say, 90% of my social life involves walking and talking, as well as the work side of things. So it's really important to me personally. But I think being able to bring nature into sessions as well when it's appropriate for clients. And I think it also links in with some of the things within your book as well about kind of different locations for different conversations. So I think, again, that whole idea of coaching in nature, particularly because I am a hat wearer. So I do coaching, but I'm still an HR consultant because I work as a consultant doing outplacement. That's much more kind of, I think of it more as kind of mentoring, guidance, advice. And I often have to switch those hats within one session and also reestablish different power and all of that within the session. So I think that ability, when you can, to go to different locations, and if sometimes you can use nature, and here we are in Jersey that is stunningly beautiful. We've got blue space, we've got green space, we've got lovely parks, we've got outside walking spaces. We're incredibly lucky, so why would we not use that?
Yeah. And I think there's something about noticing that grows out of being in nature. So we've got a course coming up called Deeper Noticing, which is teaching coaches to notice better. And we're using a mindful photography teacher.
Oh, that sounds amazing.
It is going to be amazing. So she's going to be teaching us slowing down and noticing and touching and looking. Because I think the thing that I notice most when I listen to recordings with coaches is that something will happen and I'll say, something quite big will happen in the thinker's face. And I'll say to the coach, did you see that? And they went, no. And then I'll go look again and they'll go, oh yeah. and Ruth Davies' business is called Look Again. And so it's just an amazing opportunity to bring that nature and that looking together. Well, what an amazing thing it has been to have the inaugural book corner at the Coaching Inn.
Oh,
now I'm really torn. Well, it was your idea.
She's full of good ideas.
I'm torn between, should we call it the book corner or should we call it Have You Read?
Oh,
I like that too.
Yeah,
So,
I liked Have You Read?
So, lovely listeners, here's a question for you. Who wants to be next at this thing? Because the first person to say, can I come with a friend to the thing, can nail whether this is called Have You Read or the book corner.
Would it be a cheat if I said, can I come with Julie?
And then say what it's going to be called.
We'll have to have you back.
Yeah,
That's
I'd love
lovely.
to.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Clare and
thank you,
Julie's
Claire.
go to. So thank you, Clare Humbleby and Julie Luscombe, for coming to the Coaching In book corner. If people want to pick up a conversation with you, how do they get in contact?
LinkedIn is probably best, Clare Humbleby, and then my business is Wonder Career. So that would be great. I'd love to hear from people.
Brilliant. And that's in the show notes. Julie, how do people get in touch with you?
LinkedIn as well. I'm under Dr. Julie Luscombe on that, and my website will be peoplelikemecoaching.com. And again, I'd love to hear from people too.
Lovely. And we'd love to hear what you think, team. And hands up, who wants to be next at the book corner? You don't have to be famous. It's just a beautiful place to be. Do you know?
Or finished a book.
I don't know. I don't
Or win a
know how we've
podcast.
ended up having this kind of guests at the coaching in. It's a bit surprising to me because the first season, I just rang up all my friends and went, I want you to be on my podcast.
Oh, brilliant.
So if you want to know who my friends are, go back to the early episodes. So thank you for listening, everybody. Thank you, Claire and Julie, for coming. Remember to subscribe or follow if you want to get every episode as they drop. And we're also on YouTube if you want to see the laughing in real life. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
If you've enjoyed what you've heard today, we'd love you to share the podcast with a friend or leave a comment on social media. And if you'd like to become a regular at the Coaching Inn, you can subscribe on Podbean and all major podcast channels. We look forward to welcoming you next time. You've been listening to The Coaching Inn, 3D Coaching's virtual pub. For more information, check out 3dcoaching.com.